Thank you. I'm here with Dr. Stuart Ungar from London, England, and he has a very interesting story to tell us because he was a physician for many years practicing in London. He's going to tell us more about that. But he changed careers at 60, and so many of the DigiDame readers are interested in chapter 2 of their lives. And Stuart is a good friend. Let's have full disclosure here. And he started to tell me this story earlier today, and it really turned out to be quite interesting how he went from one career to another and how he made the transformation. So he's with us today. So Stuart, give us a little bit of your background.
I went to school in London, England, and medical school in London, and did various postgraduate degrees, and also was in academic research, but decided that that wasn't going to be my scene because I'd made that decision to become an academic doctor when I was quite young. And by the time I got there, when I was 30 or 31, with the appropriate qualifications, really wasn't interested because I loved clinical medicine. More particularly, I loved people. And so that I went on to become a general physician. But being the natural rebel that I am, I opted out of the state system that exists in the UK and put up my shingle and waited for the phone to ring. And that led to a very interesting medical career because I did whatever I felt competent to do. And for me, the definition of any good practitioner of any profession knows when they're at the limits of their own competence and can define that quite closely. So that I enjoyed relationships with good professional colleagues when I couldn't cope, and tried to look after my patients well when I could cope. Because there's the preeminent commodity in medicine for me is time. And in the British system, as existed when I was a young man, you either gave a lot of people a little piece of time, or a smaller number of people a larger piece of time. And I couldn't practice medicine with a small piece of time per patient. So I opted to just do my own thing and come out of the state system and build up my own practice. And that's broadly how I...
And how many years was that?
I was in practice about 35 years, I would say, of that sort of order. Mm-hmm. And enjoyed every second of it, both from a point of view of having a fascinating spread of the social spectrum, from politicians to aristocratic families to secretaries to old age pensioners from every social class, and enjoyed it enormously.
Okay, and what was your specialty for most of those years?
Specialty was internal medicine, as they call it in the States. And excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip.
That's lemonade, right?
Lemonade, absolutely.
Right, okay. So then what happened? I mean, you practiced, and then we're getting to the point of this video, is that you had a life transformation of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I had been in practice about 15 years. And as a resident, I had become very good friends. I was a resident. My original intention was to become an academic in neurosciences and neuropsychiatry. When I was studying psychiatry as a postgraduate doc, I became good friends with a fellow psychiatrist. We lost touch with each other and bumped into each other in a restaurant in London 15 years later. He had risen to quite senior levels in the psychiatric hierarchy in Canada, gone off and done his thing with postgraduate research and what have you, and I'd been in practice, but he was bored and I was bored, and we decided to go into business together. So we looked around for a business. And I explained to him the structure of medicine in London. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we opened a doctor's laboratory and raised the money to start this business, and it developed rapidly, so that some years later we were able to sell it and another business that we built up, and consequently that fared very well, and my practice was very busy. I was running using 16-hour days, 8 hours in clinical practice, 8 hours in company administration. And that was pretty demanding, but very, very fascinating. And in doing so, the company grew, as did my practice, and eventually it came to the point when my clinical partner had died that I actually decided I did not want to practice medicine anymore.
How old were you?
I was 60.
So what was the epiphany that made you, I mean, were you leading up to this, or was this something that just hit you like a bolt of lightning?
Well, I'd learnt on doing a lot of work on me over the years that I had gone into medicine to save my very sick father. In the years after World War II, I used to see, when I was 3, 4, 5, my father in front of me saying, "Help me, mother, I can't breathe, I'm going to die." He had very bad asthma, for which at that time there was very little treatment. And so I became very focused and decided I would be a physician. And of course, at age 8, 9, 10, there wasn't a great deal I could do except read. And I started to read medical history until within a year or two, I had absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of the history of medicine, and found it absolutely fascinating. It stood me in very good stead later when I got into medical school. But the point of the story is that, and I always pull my own leg, because yes, I did manage to make a significant contribution to saving his life later on when I was in practice. However, he conned me, because he died aged 87, and I smiled, because not at his death, of course, but more particularly that I had been conned at the age of 6, 7, 8 to being a physician. I knew I could become a physician to actually try and help him, and he conned me. And I'd had a wonderful, wonderful professional experience, but I realized when he died, I didn't actually need to do it anymore.
That's interesting. Tell everybody, because we have 2 more minutes on this particular segment, we will be doing another, what he did for a living and how you grew up.
Well, he was a cemetery superintendent, and from the age of 5 through to 25, I lived on a cemetery. And it materially affected my outlook on life.
And where was this?
This was in Willesden in northwest London. What I learnt was even the great and the good leave this world in a plain pine box, and there are no pockets in a shroud.
Okay. So how did that give you a vision for the future?
Well, in the sense that life was for the living, and I would do everything that I could to preserve it. However, by the same time, it gave me a great deal of sympathy for people who were suffering and wanted to ease their suffering as much as possible, both in practical, physical, and also in psychological terms. Mm-hmm. And made many, many good friends in practice that I saw through their illnesses, through their getting older, through them becoming fathers, grandfathers. And it was a very, very special relationship, very gratifying, a very wonderful professional pursuit, and a very... The best way I can put it, I suppose, is to say that there was a great deal of mutuality in the relationship that was very, very good with my patients.
Okay. You're gonna hold it right there.